Hi everyone, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about our paper progress assignment, and this week's paper progress assignment is to begin building your database. So your database is going to ultimately need to be 1,000 words of evidence material, but for right now we're going to start with just 500 words of evidence material. That may sound like a lot of material to you, but it's really not a terribly large amount of work or material, and in fact it's something that will require not a whole lot of critical thought just yet, and it's just going to require time. So be sure to allow a reasonable amount of time for creating your database, and know that the better job you do on this step in the process, the easier your life will be throughout the remainder of the writing process. I'm going to show you an example of this, building on one of my questions, one of the ways that I start with a good central question. So last week, you all came up with your central question, and you wrote them up, and I offered you a little bit of feedback for some of you. Some of you had a really great central question already. Some of you may have had a great question but needed a little bit of revision. Some of you even had 2 or 3 great central questions, so you just need to decide which one you want to write about. For me in my research, I do research on stand-up comedy instead of short stories, and I do work on questions of gender. So if you remember, your primary material is your question. So for me, the primary material is the comedian and their material, and for you, this will be the short story. And for me, the topic or the question that I'm looking for is this idea of manhood. So I'm looking specifically at comedians who talk about what it means to be a man. So knowing that this question is what I'm trying to build around, or I'm trying to answer this question, is really important. That's why we started with a question rather than starting with a thesis, which is something you may have done in other classes. I don't want you to worry about your thesis just yet, because your thesis is the answer to this question, so you won't know what your thesis is until you've answered it fully and completely. So the process we're going to walk through is, in the next 6 weeks following this one, is building our process and learning how to process a paper to be as efficient and as reasonable as possible. So I want you to take your central question and type it at the top of a document. That's it. So you've got it in your Canvas page. If you need to revisit it, it's going to be sitting right there. But I want you to put it into a document. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to show you what we're trying to build here. We're trying to build a set of evidence that will help us answer this. Now, the comedian that I've chosen to pull up for you as an example is this comedian. His name's Christopher Titus. So for you, instead of looking up YouTube videos, you're going to be looking to your book. So when you're looking to your book, you're going to go in with this question that you've written, and you're going to try to answer it. So if your question is, how does place work in A Farewell to Arms, then you're going to read A Farewell to Arms, and every time you see something, a quote that could help you answer that question, you're going to type it into a separate document. So for example, if you found a quote here, you're going to, in A Farewell to Arms, you're going to type your note here. For me, I did the same thing. So I went through this comedian's specials, and I just wrote all of the quotes that could help me answer this question. That's it. Just quotes that could help me answer this question. So you'll notice a couple of things here. I talk about the set. It looks like a living room with no furniture. So I'm offering very specific, very precise details. Then I have quotes, and I already put the quotes in, and you'll notice that there's none of my own thoughts being interjected yet. I'm not trying to figure out what I'm trying to say yet. I'm just looking at anything that can help me answer that question. And then I'm typing it into a document. That's what I did here. So you're seeing the document that was the process, that was the result of this process that I went through. And each one of these is a different special, so I'm going through and gathering as much as I can. And I'm typing it. So a couple of keys here is you wanna type it manually. That's really important. So I know that some of you may have a digital version of the book, and that's great, but if you build your database by copying and pasting, you will miss a lot of details that you'll catch if you slow down and type them manually. We're only talking 500 words. It's not really that huge. If we look here, we've got 13 words already. By the end of this, we're going to have about 60 words, which would be over 1/10 of the way there, and we're talking about a 10-minute video at most. So give yourself the time to actually type them. Don't copy and paste them You may think it's faster, but actually it's going to make your paper writing process much slower because you're going to be less familiar with the material. So don't take a shortcut here, because that shortcut will actually make your job harder in the long run. Type it all manually, even if you can copy and paste it. Here, if you think So if you see some detail in your story and you say to yourself, should I write this down? Will it be helpful? The answer is always yes, always. It doesn't hurt anything to collect more detail than necessary. And for many of you, you're going to find that getting to 1,000 words is going to be very easy. So some of you may even work ahead because next week's assignment is to finish up your 1,000-word database. So if you find yourself really moving and grooving and get to 1,000 words, then you can call it a day. And then you're good for the next 2 weeks on the paper process assignments. But the answer is always yes. So I want you to think about yourself a little bit like a crime scene investigator. You're literally looking for evidence. And so if you were a crime scene investigator and you went in and saw some blood splatter on the floor, you wouldn't think, oh, well, I don't think it's going to be useful. I'm not even going to take a photo of it. Instead, you're going to say, you know what, there's a piece of lint over there. I don't know if it's going to be useful in the future or not, but I'm definitely going to write it down just in case, or take pictures or take notes just in case. So the key here for this is you're going to go through your story like I go through the comedy. You're going to go through the story. You're going to pull out any quotes that could help you answer that question. That's it. You're not trying to answer the question yet. You're just pulling out quotes. As many as possible until you're at 500 words for this week, and next week you're going to fill that out to 1,000 words. So some of you may have seen notes where I've said that's a great question, but maybe you want to narrow it down, because chances are good if you talk about, say, race in Sonny's Blues, the story is pretty long and race is such a central topic, you might end up with 6,000 words, which is not as useful because we're trying to thin down quite a bit. Some of you may have said things like, I want to talk about, I think there was one person who had a great question about womanhood and was considering Hills Like White Elephants, but Hills Like White Elephants is only 1,000 words to begin with, so it'd be very hard, which ultimately, looking in the long run, also means it would be hard to write a paper about it because we have so little to work with. So the key here is we're trying to find that sweet spot where about 1,000 words of really great detail, so then we can pull out just the best details from there. Again, write your central question at the top of the page, go through your material, type any quotes that you could manually that you think could help you answer that question, and then sit on it from there, because we're going to let this percolate and simmer for a couple of days before we really get into the paper writing process. That's really it. It's not a super hard assignment, but it does take time. Give yourselves time to do it well, and I promise you that if you do so, it's going to make your life a lot easier in the long run, although this first step will be tedious and a little bit tiring. But one last plug to make sure you understand the value of this. I've taught this method to a lot of students, and there's only been one since I started using this method about 5 years ago who doesn't repeat this method for every paper here on out. So hundreds of students are repeating this method because it really does make your life a lot easier, and it makes your papers a lot better. So just trust me on it, go through, build a good database. If you have questions about it, reach out to me. But otherwise, good luck, keep plugging along, keep working hard.